Morning, everybody. Today is the Ides of March from the Roman calendar. We think of Shakespeare's play, Julius Caesar. But it was also on this date in 1917 that the Tsar of Russia, Nicholas II, abdicated, resigned, opening the door for Lenin and the Bolsheviks. Here we see the Romanov family, Nicholas II, his wife Alexandra, their 4 girls, and their son, the last Romanov rulers of Russia. In the 1890s, Russia started building a railroad to the Far East so it could link Vladivostok to Moscow and the populous western part of Russia. And Vladivostok was near Korea, and Japan had an eye on Korea too. Eventually, Japan and Russia will fight. It's called the Russo-Japanese War. It was a humiliation of Russia and, by extension, of Nicholas II, who was very supportive of it. In 1905, some workers were marching on the Winter Palace in Petersburg, and they were met by the troops. Many were shot. They had come in peace. They wanted to meet with the Tsar. Looks bad for Nicholas. And in the Duma, pictured here, the Russian parliament, there were many who were in opposition to Nicholas, and he just didn't have the political skill or the spine to deal with many of the challenges. Another huge challenge for him came out of the factories. There were lots of strikes and worker protests, and he didn't really know what to do. He often would just send in the secret police, and that, of course, didn't help. So on the eve of World War I, Russia was in real turmoil. So here's a map of Europe when World War I began. Russia was allied with Britain and with France, so Russia is going to go to war primarily with Germany, a little bit with Austria-Hungary too. And one of the fascinating parts of World War I is how the King of England, the Kaiser of Germany, and the Tsar of Russia were all related. So you may want to check that out sometime. Well, here's a factory. Russia was way behind when World War I came, when it came to industry. And World War I was basically industrial killing. What Russia had a lot of was soldiers. But these soldiers were poorly equipped. There are stories of Russian soldiers going into combat with pikes and shovels or really old muskets or no weapons at all. And early on in the war, the Russians suffered a terrible defeat at Tannenberg, and here's a map of where that happened. And this was really kind of the template for what was going to happen throughout the war. So here's Alexandra. She's the queen. At one point, Nicholas left home to be with the troops, and she was running the country, which was a bad thing, partly because she didn't know what she was doing, but partly because she was German, and Russia was at war with Germany. And it didn't help that Rasputin was lurking around the palace. He supposedly could help heal the son of hemophilia. Just a bad situation, and he was eventually murdered by relatives of the Tsar. Well, on this date, March 15 in 1970, the Tsar abdicated. He resigned. The political pressures were just too great, and the Duma requested that he resign, and he did. And Alexander Kerensky took over. Not Lenin right away. Kerensky was running the country. It was called the Provisional Government. He underestimated the power of the Bolsheviks, but he was the one that sent the Tsar to Siberia, hoping eventually the Tsar could leave the country. Meanwhile, Lenin takes the train to St. Petersburg. Here's the map of the final leg of it. He was helped by the Germans, and when he came to Russia, one of the first things he did was pull out of World War I, which is why the Germans helped him in the first place. But the reason the Bolsheviks took over is partly because the Kerensky government completely misread the situation. So meanwhile, the Tsar and his family are in Siberia. Here's the Tsar and his son. They were put there by the Kerensky government. But what happens when the Kerensky government falls? Well, nobody knew. So when the Bolsheviks took over, they ordered the royal family to leave Tobolsk, where they were, and go to Moscow. But on the way, the train was stopped at Ekaterinburg. You can see that on the map. They were taken off the train and put in this house, the Ipatiev house, where eventually they were murdered. And some of you know that story. But a sad, sad end to the Romanov dynasty.